Hello, my friends. Welcome to Lindy's Magpie Reads. Today I've got an all Indigenous book episode for you. This week, November 10th to the 16th, is Métis Week in Alberta, which is where I lived for decades. I am now in the province of British Columbia, and here and across Canada, November 16th is Louis Riel Day. So November 16th is the day that Canadians across the country honor the Métis leader, Louis Riel. November is also Native American Heritage Month in the US, so for American viewers, this might be especially apt for you if you're looking for books by Indigenous authors. And of course, I encourage reading books by Indigenous authors year-round. All right, let's get into the books. Starting with one that I read in October, Jordan Abel's Empty Spaces. It has won Canada's Governor General's Literary Award for Fiction. So I am very excited for Jordan Abel and his remarkable debut novel that is so different from any other novel I've read before. If you want to know more about it, I talked about it in a video that I'll link down below. And then the next week, I read an excerpt from it. So I will also link that video, and I will link the Governor General's Awards winners for this year. Sean Breathes Books talked to me about the finalists for the Governor General Awards not that long ago, and I will link our conversation if you want to know more about the Governor General Awards in general. And if you want to know why I'm not talking about another big Canadian fiction award organization, I will have links with the reasons down below as well in the description box. So, on to the books that I have finished since my last video, starting with Wînipêk, Visions of Canada from an Indigenous Center. And this is by Niigaan Sinclair, son of the Honorable Murray Sinclair, who sadly died earlier this month. Niigaan Sinclair has been contributing columns to the Wînipêk Free Press regularly, and what this book is, it's a compilation of those articles, and wow, how special to have them gathered all together. And the judges of the Nonfiction Governor General's Award agreed, because this was the winner in the nonfiction category. Sinclair's topics are wide-ranging. Many of the issues to do with Indigenous peoples, as you might expect. Sinclair himself is Anishnaabe. By the way, in my notes down below, I will include the First Nation, Métis, or Inuit Nation membership of all of the authors that I'm talking about today, in case I forget to mention them. So some of the topics that you're less likely to come across are also in Sinclair's Wînipêk, including a piece about slavery in Canada. Sinclair writes, "This country has its own history with slavery. While slave ships may not have mass transported slaves to Canada and there were no large-scale plantations, slavery was regularly practiced by rich British and French traders here. In 1628, the first enslaved African arrived in New France, and by 1759, there were 4,000 more. The racial makeup of these slaves is worth noting. 1,132 of them were African, while 2,472 of them were Indigenous. This is because, as Bonita Lawrence remarks in the online Canadian Encyclopedia, it was cheaper to buy or ultimately capture Indigenous people. Slaves were owned by both the French and the British at all levels of society, including religious institutions and hospitals. By far, the majority of slaves were owned in urban centers, primarily in Quebec and Montreal. By 1821, the last remaining slave in Lower Canada, an Indigenous woman, was donated to a Montreal hospital. In the section where he talks about the 1764 Treaty of Niagara, in addition to explaining how that treaty is probably responsible for the reason that Canadians are not Americans today, he says the 1764 Treaty of Niagara also represented an opportunity for British and later Canadian leaders to witness Indigenous pedagogies and practices that would eventually become multiculturalism, healthcare, and democracy. All things Canada likes to say this country invented. There are places where he talks about the Anishnaabe Moen, the Anishnaabe language, and an example is the word ogichida. And he says the word we use for warrior is ogichida. In Western culture, a warrior is usually characterized as some soldier embedded in combat in some distant place. Hypermasculine images come to mind, the kind celebrated in movies, professional wrestling, and sports. The term warrior literally has an embodiment of conflict based in the root word war. Absent of violence, a warrior in English has little purpose. An ogichida is different. The word breaks down into three stems: ogi, esteemed, gichi, large, and ode, heart. Brought back together, the term ogichida means a person held in high esteem due to their large heart. This kind of warrior is not one defined by violence, but by love. An ogichida is someone who dedicates their entire life to building, sustaining, and protecting community. So interesting, the whole article. Sinclair also talks about names more than once. His own name, Niigaanwewidam, his first name, has caused him some problems. He says, one time after explaining my name is Indigenous, a U.S. border agent at Wînipêk International Airport asked, well, what do you want to do on my land then? He also writes about how Indigenous names themselves have been outlawed by policy. So, for example, Vital Statistics Bureau in Manitoba outlaws any first name or last name that uses any letters outside of A to Z, or any diacritical marks that aren't used in English and French, or any hyphens or apostrophes, except in standard usage. So I guess O'Neill is okay with the little apostrophe after the O, but a name that has an apostrophe marking a glottal stop is not. So many things to get angry about and to learn about. The final article in this collection is about the election of Anishnaabe leader Wab Kinew to be the provincial leader. That was in October of 2023, and Kinew is the first First Nations premier in history in Manitoba. There's one article where he talks about how many Indigenous writers come from Wînipêk, including David A. Robertson. That's one that he mentions specifically. And he also mentions the next book that I'm going to tell you about, This Place, because David A. Robertson has one of the pieces in this collection. And he also mentions that it is published by Highwater Press. The next 3 books that I'm going to tell you about are all published by Highwater Press, which has a focus on publishing Indigenous graphic novels. So, on to This Place, 150 Years Retold. The foreword in here is by Alicia Elliott. There are 10 stories drawn from historical occurrences through Canada's history. It does go through a timeline, and there is a physical timeline across the bottom on the opening page for each one of the stories, as well as an introduction to the history behind the incident that is being told in a story fashion. So this is a combination of nonfiction and fiction. This is heavy, and I'm going to put it down while I talk about it. David A. Robertson's story in here is called Peggy, and it is about a World War I veteran, Francis Pegamagabo, who was the most decorated Indigenous soldier in Canadian history. Pegamagabo also inspired Joseph Boyden's novel 3-Day Road, and I have a book currently waiting on hold for me to pick up at the library. It's, I think, a collection of poetry called The Dialogues, The Song of Francis Pegamagabo, and it's by Armand Garnett Ruffo. I'll be telling you more about that one soon. Now, this book was actually a reread for me. I had it out from the library again because Jolene of Bookworm Adventure Girl and I we had a conversation on the nonfiction books that were nominated for the Best Canadian Books of the 21st Century project. So if you missed that conversation, I'll link it down below, and from there you can find out more about this project of the Best Canadian Books also. So the final story in This Place is actually set in the future. It's set in 2350, and it's written by Chelsea Vowel, who is a fierce, amazing, queer Métis scholar and author. So in her story, she wants to give hope that Indigenous peoples and their cultures are going to continue to exist far into the future. I also have to take this moment to praise her collection of short stories, Buffalo is the New Buffalo. And I learned partly where this title comes from in Niigaan Sinclair's Wînipêk, because he talked about a sculpture that was erected in Wînipêk, I think in 2020, and it's called Education is the New Bison. It was created by Val Vint. It's 12 feet tall, and it's made out of hundreds of steel representations of books written by Indigenous authors. Chelsea Vowel also wrote Indigenous Rights, a guide to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit issues in Canada. This is very readable. She has a really good sense of humor. So, nonfiction and fiction, and now a graphic novel story, all by Chelsea Vowel, and so many other great authors in here. I am going to list all of the authors who've contributed and the illustrators as well in the show notes, because you can go on to find other great books just by looking up those authors. When I was talking to Jolene about the nonfiction titles, that conversation that I mentioned, I erroneously said that Kateri Akiwenzie-Damm was the editor of this collection. She's only listed first for alphabetical reasons, but her story in this book is very touching. It's called Nimki, and it is about Indigenous children in foster care. So after residential schools, the social services, the removal of children from their homes continued, but just under a different guise. And so this story is about one such girl and what happened to her and a boy. They were basically on this farm to work and not to be loved. It's heartbreaking, and it's a story that happened over and over again. Akiwenzie-Damm does say in the introduction that she adopted rather than have children of her own because of so many Indigenous children being in foster care. And this next book, also by Highwater Press, Little by Little, You Can Change the World, is about a child in foster care. This is a graphic novel. It's suitable for elementary school and junior high, and it is by Sonia Ballantine, Rael McGregor, Tobin Rasicot, and Michael Redhead Champagne. So the boy Michael in this book is based on Michael Redhead Champagne, who says, I always thought I won the foster kid lottery. The Champagnes fostered 300 kids and adopted 2, me included. But as I grew up, I thought about the other 298 kids who were no different from me. And it's such an inspiring story about how you can raise your voice and make a difference. Michael has such a strong sense of what is right and wrong, and he speaks up when he sees injustice, and you just gotta love him. Oh, it's great. And next is another autobiographical novel for elementary school and junior high, Between the Pipes. The story is by Albert McLeod, who is Cree and Métis, told together with Sonia Ballantine again, Elaine Murdoch, and the art is by the non-binary Ojibway artist Alice R.L. So I'll show you what the art is like inside. It is about a hockey player who is afraid to come out. He needs role models, and he finds them in this book. Another inspiring book, one of the subjects it deals with is toxic masculinity. I forgot to mention that Albert McLeod is one of the founders of the organization Two-Spirited People of Manitoba. So next, I have a picture book. This is a concept picture book that is suitable for all ages, and it is so beautiful. I'm going to insert a flip through it so you can see for yourself. Madzagale, the language of seasons. Story, beaded illustrations, and hand-cut paper by Shauna Davis. Photography by Tunasa Jordana Lugi. Oh, this is a story about nature and its importance in our lives and why we need to respect it. In the opening, she says, "Welcome, friends," and explains Madzagale is the Sim-Alyak word for flower. It is also an endearing term Gitsan people call their children. This story weaves childhood memories of being closely tied to the land and reflects the teachings that continue to be passed down as we move through the seasons in the footsteps of our ancestors. And she also explains about the artwork and why beadwork is so special. I actually heard about this book from IBI Canada's From Sea to Sea to Sea, celebrating Indigenous picture books. So this is now 3 lists that are online with recommended picture books by Indigenous authors and illustrators. So I will include a link to that below. The most recent list uses art from Madzagale on the cover. I've got another children's picture book for you. This one's called Being Home, and it's by 2 award-winning creators, Tracy Sorrell and Michaela Goad. Just have a look inside this one. And it is about a girl and her mother who move from the city to their traditional territory, their home, where lots of relatives are, and just how special that is to be there. So precious. Really captures those kind of emotions. And in Niigaan Sinclair's Wînipêk, one of those stories has this same message in it as well. He writes about the emotional impact when the Shoal Lake 40 citizens were able to return to their home and some of the reasons why they hadn't been for a long time. Little tears were shed. Next, I have an audiobook for you, The Mighty Red by Louise Erdrich. Now, I don't think she needs any introduction to you, an American author of Chippewa and German descent. The audiobook is read by Marina Ireland, who has a really nice kind of even cadence for everybody. There's lots of different characters, but she manages to very quietly help keep every one of them separate. Plus, of course, Louise Erdrich's writing helps to do that too. One thing about the characters in this book, though, I frequently felt dismayed by their choices, and you just get frustrated by the people and what they're doing. This is set in about 2009, I think. It's set in a farming community in North Dakota, and sugar beets are the main crop. There's a lot of talk about weeds, about Roundup ready seeds for sugar beets that can be treated with herbicide without killing the beets. Weeds in general and how to control them are one of the central issues. That aspect of the environment, which is something that I am quite passionate about. Crystal, who's one of the central characters, she does not have a lot of money, so she eats a lot of weeds, free, nutritious food that's out there. She is a truck driver transporting sugar beets, and her daughter, Kismet, is a rebellious teenager with two guys who are interested in her. Now, the romance aspect of this book is another reason why it didn't always quite work for me, because I'm not that interested in romance plots. But again, it's Louise Erdrich, and of course she won me over. And of course her writing is fantastic. Here's an example. After she had walked back out into the rain, Hugo had stared fixedly at the drips on the mat and at the streaming window of the door, much as a dog stares after its departing human. Now, Hugo flipped the lamp off, closed the book, and set it gently on his heart. Perhaps it was dangerous to love as a dog loves. To love with canine devotion was to live in a state of miserable exhilaration, to exist on a knife-thin edge of joy. So be it, said Hugo. There's another place in the novel where two of the characters are talking about a bison wool, and that one says, "Did you know they tried to make buffalo wool a thing?" And the other person says, "I bet it was scratchy." Well, bison wool is actually from the underdown, the finest part of bison, and it is so soft and warm and expensive. It is a thing. It definitely is. Just so you know. My next audiobook is by the queer Métis writer Jen Ferguson, and it's called A Constellation of Minor Bears. The audiobook has 3 different narrators, and which I always love when an audio production does this, because the story switches between 3 different viewpoints. The viewpoints are of young people who are walking the Pacific Crest Trail, the same walking trail that Cheryl Strayed of the memoir Wild wrote about. Ferguson also wrote The Summer of Bitter and Sweet, which I loved, and also Those Pink Mountain Nights, which is really good. I didn't like A Constellation of Minor Bears quite as much, partly because romance is central to the plot here. And one of her characters, Molly, is just so prickly and angry. Well, normally I'm not averse to characters who are angry. If you think about The Woman Upstairs by Claire Massoud and just how angry she is at the beginning of that book, and I love it. But the reason why Molly is angry didn't make sense to me. I guess everybody's different. She has a Métis father and a white mother. She has a half-brother who's white. His name is Hank. He's out and gay, and he's also recovering from a very severe traumatic brain injury. And she's walking this trail with her best friend, a Métis guy named Trailer, who has a secret crush on her. And then there's this other teen that joins them, Bryn. She's fat and she's queer. So one of the things that I love about this book is the, I guess, fat positive messaging, that body ideals are damaging to women and to men and bees, as the author says in her note at the end. Fat phobia is health issues and disordered eating are separate from how we look. And I think this is dealt with very well in the novel. And there's lots of queer representation in this novel. And there's a lot of examples of the microaggressions that Indigenous people encounter. So, for example, when they fly from Edmonton to San Diego to the point where they're going to start on the Pacific Crest Trail, they connect through the Vancouver International Airport. And Trailer is wearing a shirt that says, "You are on native land." They get held up at U.S. Border Customs for an hour and a half, just because. And when they're at the last minute, they do make their flight before the gate closes. And then on the plane, Trailer encounters this guy who says, "I've got 3 words for you: doctrine of discovery." And Jen Ferguson writes, in Trailer's voice, "Doesn't matter where I go, somebody has something they need to say about Indigenous peoples, and they say it, even if I'm not open to listening. This man throws around the doctrine of discovery as if the concept of uninhabited land isn't a flawed one we've taken apart over and over again as we fight colonialism." And I also like that these characters don't stand by when somebody says something that they disagree with. So there's a teenager named Faith who learns that Molly skipped a grade, and that's how it is that she's graduated from high school at age 17. And she says, "Lucky! If I knew being a smarty pants would get me out of school faster, maybe I would have tried it out. Only I'm not that smart." Bryn cuts in. "Don't say that about yourself. Everyone can put on their smart pants whenever they want." Yes, I love it. And they also talk about John Muir being a product of his time, a white man who believed in his own supremacy. I think this is Trailer again saying, "We forget that now. All the girlies and mountain bros who post photos and caption it with, 'The mountains are calling and I must go.' John Muir wouldn't want me or Molly hiking in his mountains. Probably not Hank or Bryn either." And that would be because they're queer. So another thing I really appreciated about this book is some different examples of parenting styles that these young people, how their parents are reacting to what they're doing. And at the very end, in the afterword, at the end of the audiobook, Cynthia Latex Smith asks, "Have you read many books by and about Indigenous people? Hopefully, a constellation of minor bears will inspire you to read more. This novel is published by Heartdrum, a native-focused imprint of HarperCollins." I love that there's a reminder that to readers that you can look for an imprint like this and find other books by Indigenous authors. And there's also a reminder to all readers that YA novels like this offer space to think about big questions and deep feelings. And that's why I keep reading YA. Last up, this is the best of the bunch, and there are some fabulous books already that I've told you about, but Dorothy Grant, An Endless Thread, by Dorothy Grant and several other writers. Oh, this book is amazing. I heard Dorothy Grant talk about it at an event at the Vancouver Writers Festival in October. She was on stage with Dana Claxton, who was talking about her book Curve, which is about women carvers of the Northwest. I haven't got my hands on that one yet. I will talk about it another time. Dorothy Grant was born into the Raven clan of the Kaigani Haida in Alaska in 1955. She began sewing when she was 13, and she learned traditional Haida arts in the early 1980s from Florence Edenshaw Davidson of the Haida Gwaii. And so Dorothy Grant graduated from fashion school in Vancouver and launched her first collection of haute couture garments appliquéd with traditional Haida art in 1989. That's Florence Edenshaw Davidson. There's Dorothy with Bill Reed, the Haida artist who encouraged her to do this kind of work. And there's Kim Campbell, who was Prime Minister of Canada. That's one of Dorothy's capes behind her. Dorothy can be seen in this photo weaving a traditional Haida hat. As you can see, that's the style. And all of the colored hats that are in this lookbook are made from felt. So she made an oak form and then has been making felt hats in the same shape as the traditional woven ones. So this wedding dress, which is also on the cover of the book, Dorothy Grant says the image came to her in a dream, and it's so special. It's currently owned by a museum. A number of her pieces are owned by museums around the world. She shares an anecdote that she did submit one of her garments to a juried show at a museum, and it was disqualified because the judges didn't believe that such high quality was created by hand by a native person. Together with this book, there is an exhibit of Dorothy Grant's clothing at the Haida Gwaii Museum. So this book goes along with it, and it is very special. So that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so very much for watching. I really appreciate hearing from you, so please do say hello in the comments down below. Let me know if I've inspired you to pick up any of these. Also, if you have recommendations of books by Indigenous authors, let me know in the comments, please. I appreciate that too. Now, Dorothy Grant inspired me to get back to sewing. I used to do a lot of appliqué. I have not unpacked my sewing machine since I moved to Victoria a little over a year ago. We'll see how much longer it takes before I get it out, but I did go and look at photos. I kept a collection of Many of the appliqué blankets that I have made in the past, I started making them in the mid to late 90s, and I sold a bunch at craft fairs, and I don't make polar fleece blankets anymore. I actually don't even like the feel of polar fleece very much anymore, but if you want to see the kind of work that I did when I was in my 30s, stay tuned, and I will include some photos at the end of this video. Thanks again for watching, everybody. I hope to see you all again soon, and in the meantime, happy reading. Bye. This one's called Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. And this one's I Heard the Mermaid Singing. When Night is Falling. This one was inspired by another lesbian novel, Martha Moody, by Susan Stinson. There's a flying cow named Azrael in it. And this is from the movie Go Fish. Oh, this is based on Jane Rule's Desert of the Heart, which was also a movie, Desert Hearts. Here I am at a craft fair. I don't remember the inspiration for this one, maybe Northern Lights. Oh, I made so many rainbow triangles. Those were very popular. I really like doing animals too. I did a number of commissions. This elephant was a commission. Oh, and so was this Oilers blanket. You know, you're not supposed to copy official logos, but what the heck. Somebody wanted a dragon. This was a fundraiser for a library. This medicine wheel was for a lesbian wedding. This commission was a lot of work, but I really like how it turned out. I really like cows. And cats. More cats. It's fun seeing my house as it used to look in Edmonton years ago, decades ago. There's my friend's cats. I think this one was called Phenomenal Woman. This was a blanket for somebody who wanted something to do with peace. I made this one after we went to Malta, and this one as well. So this was probably in about 2001. I did do a lot of flowers. That's my niece Nancy on the right, who still loves horses. And there's my mom. Anyway, I just visited Nancy in Portland earlier this month, and she's in her 30s now. We're getting older, but I like seeing my face. I just look so young. There's the Labrys, old-fashioned dike symbol. I made this blanket for my mom. Can't remember the story behind this one. Oh, this was a gift I made for my sister-in-law, Valerie. And I did some vests as well. And thanks for watching.